Hello, and welcome to the first episode of the Chamber Orchestra of Philadelphia's podcast miniseries for Recomposing the Past, an African American Perspective. This project has been generously supported by the Pew Center for Arts and Heritage. The first performances of this project begin on December 15th, 2023, in the Perlman Theater at the Kimmel Cultural Campus in our season concert titled Vivaldi's Gloria and Evan Williams. This performance features the world premiere of Mr. Williams' A Little Mass for Christmas, with countertenor Reginald Mobley and soprano Sage Diagro Ruop. Today, we are talking with composer Evan Williams to learn about his background in music, as well as the passions he's bringing to this project.
Hi, my name is Evan Williams, and I'm a composer and conductor, and I'm proud to be in residence with the Chamber Orchestra of Philadelphia.
Hi, Evan. Thanks so much for being with us today. Why don't we get started talking about your musical background? Did you have a musical family, and what brought you to composing?
I originally don't come from a classical musical family. My mom did play oboe when she was a kid, but I never heard her play. And my dad didn't really play any instruments, but they were both great music lovers. Listened to a lot of jazz and gospel and rock and hip hop growing up. So a really big variety. I started playing music myself in fifth grade band with trombone, and that's when I started thinking more seriously about classical music. And my first big exposure to orchestral music is actually from film, and so my dad and I are both really big fans of Star Wars, and so listening to the film soundtracks of John Williams were really sort of my first exposure to orchestral music. And originally, when I was uh, decided to become a composer, I thought I would be a film composer because I just thought either the folks that were making orchestral music were dead folks that weren't around anymore, like Mozart and Beethoven. And if you were a living composer, you were writing film music. But of course, I learned better as I got older and got exposed to more variety of composers.
I'd love to dive into the inspirations you get from composers. Which composers and musicians would you say have most influenced your work, and how do you see them in your own compositions?
So my influences, composer-wise, are really wide. So as early back as medieval music and of course Renaissance and Baroque music, folks like Bach and Handel and Purcell, but more recent composers that inspire me, folks like the minimalist Steve Reich and Philip Glass, Arvo Pärt, and you can hear that in my music. There's a lot of pulse-driven music and process and repeating patterns, but also folks like Giacinto Chelsea and Ligeti. I draw on their use of like dissonance and things like that, and I'm also influenced by like spectral composers like Grisey and Marais, and really thinking about how timbre plays into my work. So a really large variety, and of course the music I had growing up, like rock and hip hop and gospel and jazz, can be seen in my music as well.
Wonderful. Could you share some insights into your creative process? How do you go about translating emotions or concepts into fully formed musical pieces?
My creative process is a fairly long and involved one. It usually starts with like these micro ideas, and either I get those ideas down on paper, manuscript paper, but actually more often I will record a voice memo in my phone of a melody or a texture or something like that 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 has come to me and that I really want to explore more. And then I go into this process of drafting form, and that happens on literally graph paper. And I use time markers, the boxes of graph papers as time markers. And it's not really like if you looked at this, you wouldn't be able to probably understand what any of it means. There are like different gradations of pencil shadings and weird shapes and whatnot, but it all makes sense to me and how I think about my music. And then finally comes the notes and the rhythms and fleshing out the material and creating a full piece. Translating emotions, I mean, that's a hard question, but there are certain musical gestures that have certain emotional codes to me, and they might not mean the same to everyone. So it's like when I think of something that is sad or mournful, I usually will do this like repeating pattern of like quarter notes or something like that with some maybe tight harmonies, but that are, you know, tonal, but they have like a seventh or a ninth or 11th or something like that within there. So, a little bit about my insight as a composer.
The full title of this project is Recomposing the Past, an African American Perspective. Can you talk about what that means to you, both for what you want this project to achieve and also how you think about that in your career?
Um, Yeah, so this idea of recomposing the past, an African American perspective. I mean, throughout my music, looking at the work of the past and um, finding a way to bring it into my current time and voice and opinions and thought. That's sort of how I write. So if you're familiar with my music, I have works like Beautiful Death, which looks at the idea of, of unrequited love, especially in fiction, of female characters who then take their own life for this unrequited love, and how male writers seem to be fascinated with this. And it takes Dido's lament and recomposes and recontextualizes in a different way, or my harpsichord concerto, Dead White Man music, which was my grappling with my love for the canon, but the lack of education in any other diverse music that I had going through school. And so, it's been a way for me to process the past in a way that says, well, these people maybe would not have welcomed me in the past, these composers that I love. But how do I, square that with who I am and what their music means to me? And so that's sort of what this title of the project means to me, and how I see myself as a composer, at least now, grappling with this very loaded history that we've had to deal with.
And what is it that drew you to wanting to compose a mass for the first part of this project?
I've always wanted to write a mass setting. I've been interested in the mass form ever since I was an undergrad going through music history. And in fact, I started writing one, but of course decided, not to. I'm especially interested. Actually, not in. I am interested definitely in the Catholic Mass, but I even get really interested by the Orthodox liturgy, especially the Orthodox settings by Rachmaninoff. I think they're gorgeous, and sort of my first really strong desire to write my own mass was the same summer that I discovered Beethoven's Missa Solemnis, but also Rachmaninoff's liturgy of Saint John Chrysostom. And so ever since then, and that was when I was the summer after my freshman year of college, I've wanted to put my own stamp on the mass setting.
Now, in this performance, your mass premiere is being paired with Vivaldi's Gloria, and the Gloria itself, of course, being a text that features pretty prominently in the Christian uh, Mass setting. In what ways have you taken inspiration from Vivaldi? And are there other major works or styles that we could expect to hear in the piece this December?
It's a really great pairing because of the sort of chamber and baroque influences that I have in my music. They're going to go together well, but specific musical ideas from the Vivaldi will not appear in my piece, though. There are going to be some very specific musical references in my work. First of all, I'm going to use the In Splendoris Sanctorum in the Splendor of the Saints, which is a hymn that is sung at Christmas time, I believe, in the Midnight Mass. I'm also using other texts like the Hodie, but not the melody, but the for the In Splendoribus Sanctorum, I will be using the original melody as inspiration. Also, if you are keen of ear, in my setting of the Gloria, I'm going to reference my own favorite Gloria setting, which is not Vivaldi, sadly, but it's actually Poulenc, Francis Poulenc, his Gloria. And so, if you listen carefully, the last movement of the Poulenc, Qui sedes ac destram, is my favorite. Absolute. I just love when the tenors and the altos just like scream that out. And so I have a very similar inspiration, a very similar setting of those words in my own glorious setting.
Okay, thanks. Now, final question. As a composer, what do you hope to achieve with your music? Are there any specific messages or emotions you strive to convey through your works? And hoping for, of course, a long, productive life, what do you want your legacy for future generations to be, for both musicians and performers, but also for audiences?
So what do I hope to achieve? You know, it's different for each piece. And honestly, these days I'm hoping to achieve self-expression, like um, honest, sincere self-expression. When I was younger, was very political in my music, and my music did have political messages, and you can see that in works like my opera Jonestown and my harpsichord concerto Dead White Man music. But um, something changed during the last presidency, and not to get too political, but I actually kind of felt like overwhelmed by the enormity of the politics that I had been so involved with before that I sort of disengaged. And so after 2016, 2017, you see my work turn toward more broad subjects. And sometimes that's using things from the Catholic tradition, which is interesting because I'm not a religious person. I used to be Catholic, and before that, I was raised Pentecostal. But I've turned back to that for some reason. I guess there's some sort of peace that I find in that age old tradition. And so, and especially after I've lost my father in 2021, I do find comfort in that. And so I've turned away from the more overtly political things and more toward a genuine expression of sort of who I am as a person and what I need to say for myself. In terms of legacy, it's something that, you know, I don't really think about. I used to when I was a student composer. I used to think like, well, I need to write music that will live on after me. But my sort of my transition from religion also sort of made me stop really caring about what comes after me, and just like what's important to me now is that I get to express myself in the ways that are meaningful to me. rather than thinking about what will live on after me. Uh, so that's sort of how I go about composing these days. But of course, who knows what the future will bring.
Thank you so much, Evan, for taking the time to talk with us today. We are very excited to hear the world premiere of this piece this coming December, and also for the rest of the project as it takes us into the next season as well. Tickets for these performances can be found at chamberorchestra.org, and we hope to see everyone there and to talk with Evan and several of the other artists in the upcoming episodes of our podcast miniseries. Thanks again to the Pew Center for Arts and Heritage for supporting this project, and we look forward to talking to everyone else very soon.